All right, NYB community, welcome back. We are here, episode number 223. We got the train moving right on down the tracks. I'm your host, Champ Ron. This is the Minding Your Business podcast, entrepreneurship, real estate, trending news. There's no business like minding your own. Recording this on November the 20th of 2020. So we're in kind of the last days, not the last days from the Bible. Although those have been going on maybe for some time, who knows? But we're in the last days of 2020. Coming up on the Thanksgiving holiday, we've got a lot to be thankful for. I know this has been a trying year for many. It's been a tremendous year for others. And I hope that either way, you're a champion because you're still here and you still have an opportunity to be just a little bit better. Subscribe to the podcast. 5-star helps us continue to grow the NYB community and expand our reach. And definitely check me out at champronbrooks.com, where you can see all of my fiascos and escapades and ventures and everything else. And don't forget to sign up for my free real estate investing workshop that we're going to have Sunday, December 27th at 4 p.m. There are just a few slots left. It's going to be virtual. It's going to be Zoom. And 1 hour, we're going to start on time. So you got to be on time for class. And we're going to dive right in. Everything that I do that you need to know to jump into real estate. I'm going to debunk some myths, like things like no cash, no credit. I'm going to share with you why that's not 100% accurate, but how you can nonetheless get involved. So check that out at champronbrooks.com. Listen, I'm excited about today's guest who joins us from Chicago, Illinois. And, that's my birth home area up there. Cook County's on my birth certificate. Matter of fact, I think it's between Cook County. I was born like right around like Cook County and DePage. So it's kind of weird. The hospital, I have to ask mom about this. The hospital said sanitarium or something like that. I was like, what in the world was I? Where was I born? I was like, sanitarium. That sounds like I might have been born in a museum or something. I don't know. I don't know. But anyway, I'm excited about today's guest, man. Mark Willis joins us, who's a certified financial planner. He's a 2-time #1 best-selling author and the owner of Lake Growth Financial Services. Again, that's right there in Chicago, Illinois. He's also the co-host of the Not Your Average Financial Podcast, which I want you, when you get done, you know how we are, NYB, about podcasters and the great podcasts out there. So I want you to subscribe to Mark's podcast. When you get done, go ahead and do that. Add it to your repertoire. You can't, you're like Batman. You can't have too many tools in your utility belt. But this the Not Your Average Financial Podcast. Make sure you subscribe to that. Leave him a 5-star positive comment. No positive, right? An actual comment. Don't just hit the 5 stars. Hit the 5 stars and leave a comment. That way you can support the podcast and let them know that you heard them right here on the Minding Your Business podcast. But Mark, thank you so much for joining here on a Friday afternoon. I know there's a lot of other places you could be, man, but I appreciate you being right here with us.
Hey, no problem. TGIF, Ron, I appreciate it.
Yep, no doubt about it, man.
And I'll tell you real quick, I was born in Tennessee. So you and I we must have been like swapped at birth or something. We brothers from another mother or something, because you were born in Chicago. Now you're in Tennessee, right? And vice versa for me. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Cool. So who knows? We might have been ships passing in the night, man.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, my birth certificate has some interesting things too. I think I was in Jackson, Tennessee when I was born, but my parents moved out of Tennessee a few weeks later. But for the rest of my life, I'm a proud Tennessean by birth anyway.
Oh, I love it, man. I love it. And I'm a proud Illinoisan who made his way eventually here to Tennessee. And so, when it said Sanitarium or Santorium, whatever it says, I'm thinking aquarium. I was like, man, I was born with the fishes too. Sleep with the fishes.
That's awesome.
Mark, let's dive right in, man. For those that aren't familiar with you, tell us about your journey pathway, kind of through your life to get to where you are today.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it was a dark and stormy night when we graduated college and we moved to the great city of Chicago. It was 2008. And Ron, you might remember what was happening in the world economy in 2008.
Sure.
not unlike many people unfortunately are experiencing this year with record unemployment. And my heart and my thoughts and prayers go out to everyone who's been financially
Yeah,
or medically impacted this year in a negative
absolutely.
way. But we started our life much in the way that many of our clients are coming to me. We're having a lot of folks coming at us this year, phone, Zoom calls, whatever, and just saying, "Hey, Mark, we need a strategy. We need a plan that doesn't rely on who sneezes on who." Their financial life is
Right.
dependent on things that are so fragile. We live in a very fragile world, financially and otherwise. And a part of our overall desire to start Lake Growth Financial Services, the firm here in Chicago, was to become not just resilient, but the opposite of fragile. If you think about it, there's fragile, but as an English language, we don't have a word for what the opposite of fragile is. People
Mm,
think strong, resilient, tough, but that's not quite the same. That's not an opposite. That's maybe middle ground.
sure.
The opposite of fragile is something that becomes stronger under pressure. And
Mm,
there's other languages that have words for this. Hormesis is the Greek word for it. But the idea is becoming actually thriving in the midst of calamity. And
mm,
anybody who works out, anybody who, like yourself, an athlete, you know that it's under the pressure of all the weights that you're lifting. You're tearing your body down when you're at the gym, but
yes.
it's for a purpose. You're becoming not just resilient, but you're becoming stronger as a result of the disaster, the calamity of bad times or tough times or pressure. And so I don't want a financial plan that's fragile. I don't want
Mm,
one that's just sort of resilient. I want something that actually gets better under
sure.
pressure, because I don't, if you're like me, and if your audience believes like me that we're not done with volatility yet, I mean,
Right.
think about this. We've had 3 major market crashes where the market took a 50% nosedive 3 times just
Yes.
since the year 2000.
Yeah,
Now, do you think that might happen again?
of course. No
And
doubt.
do you
Count
want to
on
be
it.
ready for it? I mean, yeah, we should be
Absolutely.
counting on it. Yeah. How can
Yeah.
we position ourselves to even improve our situation under such circumstances? So that's a bit about our story. We left college with $120,000 of student loan debt. We had no
Wow.
plan, no job, to pay it off. And
Yeah.
it felt like a mortgage payment on our back. And that's sort of where life began for us. But that's, I'd say, more often than not. I just heard that we're at like $1.7 trillion in student loan debt across the country.
Yeah.
That's a problem that's going to plague us for many, many years.
Yep, absolutely. And so let's jump on that piece, Mark, if we can, the student loan, because a lot of people can relate to that, including here in my house with kind of student loan debt, and and student loan debt varies, right? Because obviously overall there are those that believe it's a tremendous investment, of course. There are those that would side or argue that it's not, and that spending those years actually doing something and making money is a better investment than taking on the student loan debt. And then that can always vary depending on if you're talking undergrad versus say graduate school or an advanced degree. But either way, talk about, I guess, your journey with the student loan debt and how you got your arms around that, because I think a lot of people listening to this, one of the things that hinders a mark is having they're straddled with that extra debt and they don't really have a plan, or they just constantly defer it to the point where they almost just defer it through their whole life, right?
Mm-hmm,
And it's one of those debts. It's the gift that keeps giving, right? It accrues interest and it just kind of sticks around, and you never really get rid of it. Or it's not that easy to get rid of it. So talk about kind of that for you and your family and how you were able to overcome it.
Well, that is true. It's sort of like driving the car, looking through the rearview mirror of your life. And,
Yeah.
we were following the snowball method of paying off the debt, which is a famous way of paying off the debt. Dave Ramsey made it very popular.
Yeah.
But the method is simple. You simply just live on beans and rice. And on Friday nights, you'd get to splurge for some rice and beans. And and then you'd pay off that debt as hard and as fast as you could.
Right.
And
Right.
that was feeling good at first, but then there came sort of this empty feeling. And I'll describe it, and you tell me what you think about this. But
Yeah.
about halfway through our project of paying off all this debt, because we were working hard, we were raising, we were throwing down large amounts of cash on the debt.
Yeah.
Back then, interest rates are fairly low, 2-3%. And
Right.
we woke up one day and we said to ourselves, we're about halfway done with this. What have we got to show for all of our hard-earned money?
Yeah.
And all we had to show for all those monthly major bill payments to Sally Mae and all of her cronies was a bunch of thank you notes.
Right.
Thank you for your payment.
Thank you for your money.
For your payment. Yeah. And I don't know about you, Ron, but I can't get those things to earn any interest.
Right.
They're just sitting there collecting dust.
Yeah, they're not the type of notes that that you could use almost like savings bonds, right?
Yeah. I can't invest those notes. That's for sure. No, those are not love letters I need to put away anywhere.
Right.
I want to shred those letters. So my wake up call was realizing that I was throwing money down a hole that I could never get back, and I was in my mid-20s at the time. So that's even more so a powerful dollar, more powerful than a dollar in my 30s or 40s or 50s is a dollar in my 20s or even earlier than that, because time value of money, every dollar it compounds becomes more valuable in the future.
Yes.
So we came across sort of two thoughts sort of happened at the same time, and it helped to have a good couple of mentors helping us think this through. But we realized, step one, paying off the debt the old-fashioned way was not the answer, because we were losing the growth on that dollar. We weren't just wanting to be debt-free. We wanted to be better than debt-free.
Sure.
When people call a certain radio program and scream, "I'm debt-free," all they're saying is, "I'm at the starting line of my life," which is better than a mile behind, I guess. But I wanted to be further into the marathon at that point. So that was one wake-up call. The other wake-up call was that there were at least 4 major critical flaws with traditional financial planning. And as I was going through my CFP, I discovered these 4 fundamental flaws, which I'd be happy to share with your audience if you'd like.
Sure,
that
please.
Brought me to discover that I couldn't, in good conscience, recommend to my clients or take it into my own portfolio either. So those 2 tracks to run on: how do I pay off my debt in a way that I can become really wealthy? And 2, I cannot put my money into the house of cards that is traditional retirement plans.
Sure.
You want me to run down that path?
No,
or
please.
take it somewhere else?
Definitely.
Okay. In just a very brief couple of moments here, the big 4 problems I see with traditional retirement plans. 1, there are no guarantees that I will have anything to show for my money inside a traditional retirement plan. I'm talking about 401ks, IRAs, 529 plans for college. The list goes on and on. Roth IRAs. So there's no guarantees, no predictability. The only guarantee is that the Wall Street advisor will be paid whether we win or lose.
Right.
And so that's the first piece. Also, I learned in terms of guarantee, there's no guarantee that we will be able to live and let our money last as long as we do.
Sure.
Now, most research is telling us that we can only take about 2.5% to 3% of our money out of our 401ks in retirement. So what that means, safely to take that money out. So what that means, Ron, is if I've got $1 million in my 401k, I can take about 28 grand out and not run out of money. That's the millionaire lifestyle. Now, that's tremendously inefficient, in my opinion.
Right.
But it's even worse when we realize or remember that 28 grand, some of that belongs to our good uncle over there in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And so
we all have that uncle in our family, Sam, for some reason. He's related to us all.
That's right. Yeah. Well, the first name is the last name is ears, and IRS. So when you put the and IRS together, you get the word theirs.
Right.
So the biggest problem, the first problem I saw was there was literally no guarantee on any of the money I was putting away in my IRAs and 401ks and the like. The second biggest major fundamental flaw I saw was that there are fees riddling every IRA and 401k, even those that think they don't have fees. Guys, remember, Fidelity is not a nonprofit. TD Ameritrade is not a nonprofit. They are out there looking to make money. And the average 401k and IRA, even if you just have a 1% average fee on your accounts, 1% does not sound like a lot. But multiply that over a long period of time, because most people are going to have their 401ks throughout retirement. Fees add up. 1% per year, according to the Department of Labor, can eat up about a third of your life savings over your lifetime, even actually just over the next 35 years. That's a lot of money. A third of your life savings gone to just fees.
Right. Wow.
So the second piece is fees. The third is, imagine we've all been in quarantine this year.
Of course.
And some people love it. The introverts out there, they love this quarantine stuff. I'm pulling the rest of my hair out, what little I have left. But, I'd say even the biggest, deepest introvert is going to be tired of 85% of their life being in quarantine. Can you imagine being in quarantine 85% of your lifetime? That is exactly how long the average 401k or IRA is in a quarantine or a penalty zone. And we could do the math there if you want. But if someone starts a 401k at age 20, they cannot touch it again until they're 59 and a half.
Yeah.
And then they get this wonderful 13-year window from age 60 to 72. I guess that's 12 and a half years. They get 12 and a half years where they can touch the money without penalty.
Wow.
And then once you're 72, and most people don't know this, Ron, but when you're 72 years old, there's a new penalty attached to that 401k or IRA. It's called a required minimum distribution.
Okay.
Most people don't even know it's out there. And what it means
I haven't heard that.
Yeah. Is that new? Okay.
Yeah, that's new.
Let me kind of explain this one, because this shocked me when I found out. If you don't take some money out of that, and it has to be a substantial amount of money, and they calculate it for you. They say, if you don't take money out of that 401k when you're 72 or older every single year, we will give you a 50% penalty, 50% penalty on the money you should have took out but didn't.
Wow.
Government's
so the money that's sitting in the 401k account. So if you still had $1 million sitting in your 401k account, happy birthday, you're 72. Congratulations. And then you get to 73 and you didn't take out any money that year. They're going to take 50%, or they're going to tax it at a 50% rate.
Well, there's a calculated number. Maybe the number was 40 grand that you had to take out of that thing that year. And if you didn't take that out, then they're going to slap a $20,000 fee on you and take it right out of your 401k if you didn't take it out.
Wow.
And then that increases every single year. Basically, the government is tired of waiting on you spending your money.
Yeah.
And so they're going to force you to pay your taxes. They want you to take the
money out, or they want you to hurry up and die so that the money can get distributed, right?
That's right. Yeah. Wow. So if a guy starts a 401k at age 20, goes through this whole experiment and dies at age 95, he was in a penalty zone 85% of his life. His money was in quarantine.
Yeah.
For 85% of his life. So I hate that about, I find that there's a good reason to have any financial vehicle, but there's a very limited, too many people have 401ks and IRAs, more so than should have them, in my professional opinion. Doesn't mean they're wrong or bad or incorrect for some people. So the final and fourth and last one is, we are sitting on a ticking tax time bomb with most traditional IRAs and 401ks. Here's what I mean.
Right.
Folks, a lot of us have probably put off doing things like going to the dentist or physical therapy due to some of the restrictions and the coronavirus and all that's happened this year.
Yeah.
But if you put off going to the dentist too long, you're going to end up with worse problems in the future.
Right.
Right.
Facts.
Yeah. There you go. So I asked people many times, what is the understanding you have of how your 401k will be taxed? And many times they'll say, well, it's tax-free. I get a tax-free contribution and I get the money out tax-free. Yeah. And unfortunately, no, that's not true. We have a tax deferral on our 401k. Yes. And I'm sure you know that meaning of that word.
Absolutely.
Just means we're pushing it off until later.
To the future, right.
You got it. Yeah. So it's kind of like a tax postponement.
Right.
Which just, it's in some ways saying, hey, I am betting that I'll be in a lower bracket and the country will be paying, or we will be in a lower tax environment in the future than I am today.
I never understood that. Why do we think that? When does that ever happen? Yeah. When does that ever happen, Mark, where we're in a lower tax, like even if a government, whoever an administration is, Mark, decides to, to cut taxes, which is typically going to be for, oftentimes it's for the more wealthy. folks a lot of times than, for everybody else. But in the rare occasion where, a tax, I mean, it's usually not much. We're usually almost never going to be in a lower tax situation in the future than we are today. So I never understood that rationale.
It was sort of pounded into me getting kind of into the financial services world that everybody knows we'll be in a lower tax bracket when we retire. We're no longer earning income, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
My anecdotal experience has been most of our clients are in the same or higher. Why? Well, if they've done even reasonably well with their investments, they're still doing fine with their income.
Right.
And also all of their tax deductions are gone. Their mortgage paid down, the kids are out of the house. They no longer have to pay for other tax deductible expenses. So most of their deductions are gone, and they're forced to pay higher taxes on bigger numbers of money if they were reasonably successful with their retirement plan.
Yeah.
And I'm with you, man. I don't see taxes going down in the future,
And especially after this year, I mean, good grief. I mean, stimulus checks flying all over the place.
Oh, man.
This is this looks to be have been a fairly expensive election. I don't see that changing much in the future. Those are going to get more and more expensive. Depending on how population migrates, whether that's that remains in cities, people start flocking to cities again. People start flocking to more rural areas. Whatever that is, all it's going to do is just redistribute. How monies are allocated. And so, as someone, I'll be 40 in January, Mark, and I'm sitting there thinking, okay, if I were to work another, I don't know, 25 years, right? Yeah, I don't anticipate in 25 years in America that my tax situation is going to be lower than what it is today. Like you said, I've got 3 daughters, so I'll just be. Hopefully they're off my payroll, but then also I lose the deductions, like you said, all those different things. So yeah, it's an interesting concept that I don't know if we fully vet or think it through as consumers when it's presented to us.
Well, sure. Yeah. And I don't care who people voted for this election. It doesn't matter as much as where things are headed 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now. And as you spend this money throughout your retirement, realize even if taxes go up by just 1%, if taxes just go up by 1% sometime in the future, mathematically, it makes more sense to pay your taxes today on the seed. Pay your tax on the seed so you can have a tax-free harvest.
Right.
And every retirement plan that's traditional retirement plans, not Roth, but traditional retirement plans fail that test. So again, there's a lot of solutions out there, and as a CFP, I've been privileged to work with clients that have found many solutions that solve these 4 problems. But for me, it's been a learning curve, to be sure. Because just like you, I kind of just drunk the Kool-Aid when we're an adult, we're just sort of handed that 401k, we're handed those student loans, and we're just told to sign here and thank you very much and see you in the next 10 years. So for me, it was just a matter of saying, all right, what do I want my money to do for me? And where can I put my money so that it acts the way I want it to act?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's kind of been our journey so far.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And so, what kind of led you then to get your CFP licensing and designation and that sort of thing, and really, get into a kind of community, aspect of the industry, Mark, where you're helping people with this knowledge base and presenting them with options to consider and kind of make well-informed, holistic decisions when it relates to their financial situation. What compelled you, or what kind of drove you to that pathway?
Well, it was out of personal need, because your money has to live somewhere.
Sure.
And I wasn't happy with kind of being in debt. I certainly was ready to wipe that off the books.
Sure.
And I wasn't satisfied with the kind of presenting options of IRAs and 401ks and brokerage accounts and so forth. And I just knew there had to be something else, but what could I find? And, I really thought about the environment where my money was going to live over a long period of time. Much like, a fish out of water, if you put your money in the wrong places, it's going to die. but in the right
Right.
environment, a fish is going to survive and thrive and reproduce, and the same can be true with our money. So I started thinking carefully about, what do I really want my money to do for me? And started making a list. In fact, if your audience takes just one thing from today's podcast, I'd say find a time, to pencil in 5 minutes or 3 hours, however long you'd want to take here, but just at least a few minutes to write down a list of characteristics, attributes, of what you want your money to do. How do you want it to act?
Exactly.
And this could be a fun experiment we give folks a chance to start thinking about, if you'd like, Ron. But it gave me kind of the motivation to go out and start looking without a bias, because we've been, I used to think the 401k was around when God created the world, but that's not the case. Did you know that you are actually as old as 401ks? They are not any older than Ron.
Exactly. Yeah, I am. I kind of ushered it in along with, I was born. I was actually born President Jimmy Carter's last day.
Is that right? Wow.
Yeah. So I was born January 19th of 81. And so it was his last official day as president. So
amazing.
If we had gone to war that day, he would have been the one to press the button. And then the next day it would have been Ronald Reagan.
Wow.
So
fascinating.
That's how close I cut it. So I ushered in MTV and I ushered in the 401k.
You did, man. Well, happy birthday, 401k, and happy birthday to you coming up here too in January. That's awesome.
No doubt about it.
Isn't that awesome? Isn't that crazy that the 401k is not even old enough to retire yet?
No.
And yet it's sort of the presumed place for all of us. We're in this big national experiment.
Well, not only is it not old enough to retire, but it's old enough to have 50% of it cut from someone that is retired.
Wow. Yeah.
Doggone what?
That's right. That's right. That's right. Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well,
so
it's sort of like
another damn millennial taking money.
Yeah.
401k's a millennial.
Wow. So I really thought, all right, if I could just wave a magic wand, create my own perfect financial instrument, what sort of characteristics would I want it to have? Right. For me, I was thinking also for my clients, but even more so for myself at the time, I wanted easy access to cash. I didn't want it in quarantine, I wanted safety, some sort of third party auditing it wherever it was. I didn't want another Lehman Brothers moment with my cash. I wanted guarantees that it was going to be there and even grow for me on a predictable schedule, some sort of predictable, earnings where I could say, all right, in 5 years, I'm going to have that. In 10 years, I'm going to have this. So I wanted some sort of predictable schedule of growth. I wanted it to be tax-free whenever I accessed it for any reason, because I did think taxes were going to go up in my lifetime.
Yeah.
I didn't want a bunch of government restrictions on what I could put into or take out of the instrument, whatever that was. And I wanted it to be like multiple generations, because I was trying to think, how can I give to my kids and even my grandkids and my great-grandkids and keep it all private and outside of the public probate courts and more. So that was kind of my short list. That's kind of long, I guess. But Ron, would you add anything to that for yourself?
Yeah, you know what? What's interesting with that when you say that, yeah. So I've spent, and my wife and I have gone down more the pathway of insurance. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that, versus, this deep dive into 401ks and even with Roth IRAs, I've just found that insurance, and being able to grow, not just with the death benefit, but with the cash values and things like that, being able to grow, somewhat ahead of inflation. I'm not really sure how that, relates to the, from a tax standpoint, like we were talking about, Mark, but, that's kind of been more of kind of my lane. Has been, utilizing some of the creative insurance products that are out there, to offset or hope to offset some of the things like you talked about, and not get into so much of the tax deferral piece, but, kind of grow it through, basically the underwriting and that sort of thing, and the predictability of that through the insurance channel. Not sure what your thoughts are there. I'm sure there's others that are listening that have gone down that same path or are going down that path. So I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on comparison contrast, if that's at least a reasonable way of thinking, or are we way off like we are with the 401k?
Well, hey, it's all about what do we want our money to do for us. Again, there's nothing wrong with any particular financial tool. I would rather Tiger Woods golf swing and the clubs come, second in my book, so the financial products are less important than the strategy and the philosophy behind them. You brought up insurance. Most people, when I sit down and have one-on-one consultations, they oftentimes say, hey, life insurance as a place to park money, I've never heard of that before. And to them, it sounds like, how can I save money with auto insurance or my fire policy? It just doesn't, how do you do that? It just didn't make sense. It didn't compute. But you're right. There's a very old fashioned form of life insurance that builds equity, just like real estate investing, buy and hold real estate, where you can build equity in the policy and then use it to meet some of those characteristics I just talked about.
Absolutely.
And it's liquid, accessible cash. It's available tax-free for you anytime you want, if it's designed correctly.
Yeah, and it qualifies for certain, distributions, right? For certain purposes. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no restrictions on accessing the money for any reason. So Ron, you could use the life insurance cash value for your daughter's college, or for your next real estate deal, or for your own kitchen rehab, or whatever you want to do. Take it to Vegas or whatever else. It's really up to you. Yeah.
Yep. Exactly. Yep, that makes sense. So Mark, let's dive in, because we've dibbled a little bit into this subject, but I'd love to get your thoughts on it. During this pandemic, right? So, of the obstacle of all obstacles hits us. For those that remember, like you said, 2008 and that sort of thing, and the impact that the real estate bubble bursting had, worldwide, and that sort of thing. And so now, for the first time in all of our lifetimes, we're facing, kind of man versus virus, right? And so it's been many generations since we've had to deal with this. My next door neighbor, who's in his 70s, told me about with polio, and how when that outbreak kind of came about, and how the government had to manage the things and shut down. Of course, the United States was even that much more rural back then. And that sort of thing, and the interconnectivity was different. But he shared with me how that kind of went when he was a boy. But nonetheless, today we have a kind of a pickle on our hands with this coronavirus. What are you seeing? I guess compare and contrast for us. What you saw kind of leading up to it. So coming out of 2019, maybe with your clients, and was there maybe a shift or a change that occurred with a lot of your clients as March came and things got shut down, and quarantine and social distancing became part of our vernacular here. So what's kind of your thoughts there?
We really do believe in this idea of being antifragile with our money, not just strong, but actually being stronger when there's a crisis.
Yeah.
And it's those with liquidity who are able to advance during these unfortunate times, not just survive. I mean, there's a quote in Alice in Wonderland where the Queen of Hearts, she tells Alice that in this world you have to run as hard as you can just to stay in the same place. And I feel like that's probably pretty true for most Americans too, that we're all running as hard as we can just to keep up with the demands of life without falling behind. And so I would say, if you've prepared for this virus, and no one could have seen it coming, not me, nobody.
No.
But if you've got big piles of liquid contingency capital for any reason, equal maybe to even, I'll just throw out a number. Let's say it's worth as much as 2 years of your operating expenses for your business.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have that kind of capital on hand that you can access out of a whole life policy, for example, Ron, or similar cash accounts, where you can access that money for any purpose with no taxes, no penalties, no restrictions. Don't you think that might make you a bit more competitive the next time this happens?
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely will.
When we get sick, and again, I hope no one has been impacted listening to this medically from this virus, but we all know when you get sick with the flu, one of the things you need is liquids.
Right.
To lower your temperature, to lower your burn rate. If you see where I'm going with this, Ron.
Yeah.
If you can lower that burn rate in your business, lower that burn rate in your family, family expenses, cut out that those extra expenses, and bring in liquidity in your cash.
Right.
Now you've got the chance to not only make it through, but even to become stronger as a result. I believe that our clients, as we were moving into 2020, none of us saw it coming. But
Right.
I've seen more and more our clients calling me saying, "Mark, I need to access some of my cash value out of one of those policies to go invest."
Yeah.
Gentlemen, just before this call, we were having a phone call, and Ron, that's part of why I was a minute late to this interview. But he
Yeah.
was doing so well with his business that he had an extra $500,000 to dump into one of these policies, and all of a sudden now he's going to be ready, whatever comes in 2021.
Sure.
Good times or bad times.
Yeah.
And that's
Absolutely.
the power of liquidity.
Yeah, definitely. And so for those, just to compare and contrast that, Mark, for those that aren't quite in that liquidity position, because I imagine some people are listening to that as like, well, I mean, yeah, I'd love to have $500,000.
Right. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
gotta call somebody like Mark and try to figure out, what the hell do I do with it? That's
Right.
the
Yeah.
problem I have, right?
Good problem.
Yeah, I've got this $500,000, help,
Under the couch
right?
cushion. Just found it. Yeah.
Right. For those, Mark, that don't have that, right, that don't have a ton, and which is a lot of people, that don't have that type of liquidity, and they've, either tried to survive, or they try to make cuts in budget, to try to survive. What do you recommend for those folks that are, kind of kind of liquidity starved at that
Yeah.
point?
Well, the first and most, you mentioned it earlier, Ron, we are the greatest investment we'll ever have. And you can continually invest in yourself, in your health, in your sanity, and in your ability to earn an income.
Yeah.
And one thing I have just been so impressed by is the resilience of the American people in the face of crisis to become creative in finding alternative and additional streams of income. Ron, you're a champ at this. Sorry for the nickname there, but you deserve your nickname because you're bringing in multiple streams of income and then finding ways to weave them together. And that's just the power of an incredible entrepreneur. And we've got that in our spirit as a country. And I think whether it's $100 a month that you can scratch together, or less or more, that's one more. That's a little bit of buffer against whatever may come in your future.
Sure.
The trouble is most of us save for Saturday night, and I'd say let's start saving for 3 or 4 generations. That's the timeline and the hope that I would hope that each of our audience and the people listening to your show, Ron, are going to be already thinking this way.
Yes.
And I'd say it's the rich person's mindset that gets you thinking 3 and 4 generations into the future, rather than just saving for Saturday night. So that's maybe one piece of advice for anyone listening.
Yeah, no, that's great insight, Mark. And, that long-term holistic viewpoint and thinking, I think, it will benefit us all as we go forward, because again, like I like to say on the show, that helps us be just a little bit better for, ourselves, a little bit better for our families, and then a little bit better for our communities. When we think that way and have that type of mindset. And so I think this year has challenged, the critical thinking of America. And I think as we go forward into 2021, and I said this on my last episode, Mark, that we've got to put, the first word in our name as a country is united. And 2020 has challenged that word, right? Not that it wasn't challenged beforehand, because it certainly was. But that word, if you think of that word united, right? Nothing tends to unite. I mean, if you look at just in the movies, right? How many times have they made a gloom and doom, aliens are taking over movie, right? Or some catastrophe. Now, I remember the movie Independence Day, right, with Will Smith. And you remember that, when the aliens came out of the sky, every nation around the world banded together at the end, right? It wasn't about what side of the aisle they were on. There wasn't a political angle to everything, right? Like how even the virus has become has been politicized. Now it's about the survival of the human race. And so now no one has a problem uniting together, putting their resources together to fight a common enemy. At some point, I think what's going to happen with this virus is as human beings, right, we're going to have to band together, because now at some point everybody's going to have a common enemy. The challenge is across the country, because of the social economics and things like that. and many other factors, I think everything is not a common enemy for all of us, right?
Right.
There's ways to be in a bubble one way or the other and not have it as a common enemy. And that's why you see, now there's frustration, but people don't want to change behavior. And changing behavior is something that's challenged in a democratic republic. For what we're kind of a hybrid a little bit between kind of socialism and capitalism, but that's neither here nor there. So what are your kind of thoughts on that? On how we, as a country, when you're talking about that long-term thinking financially at the kind of micro individual level, how that then cascades to the kind of the larger community.
Well, I'll tell a quick story. I think the power of banking will either suppress you or liberate you.
Sure.
And here's what I mean. There's a book out there by David Graeber. It's called Debt: The First 5,000 Years. And the story of debt and banking goes back as far as the cave paintings, quite literally, Ron.
Yeah,
and he reaches some powerful conclusions in the book, but the title says it all. Debt: the first 5,000 years. So what are we doing with banking in our lives? My thought is your interaction with the banking function, not banks, but the banking function, matters more than your mutual fund's rate of return last year. I'll say that again. I don't care as much what your rate of return in your mutual fund was as who was sitting behind the banker's desk in your life. Because if the wrong person's sitting behind the desk, they're going to be in control of, in general, your financial life. But if you are your own source of financing, if you control the banking function in your life, then everything else becomes that much easier. You can walk into the bank if you need to and use them for your convenience, rather than the bank using you for their convenience.
Right.
So, by equalizing that playing field and democratizing the banking function, giving it to the people, once again, then man, you've got a really powerful opportunity to lend to one another, to borrow from one another, where it's not a mega bank telling you, your terms and conditions, but you've got the capacity to bank on yourself. And I do believe it's one of those small hinges that can swing the big door in your portfolio.
Sure.
Again, rates of return, great. What you can do with banking will trump that all day long. If we have the eyes to see and use the idea of banking to our advantage rather than our disadvantage.
Sure, absolutely. And you're speaking music to my ears, Mark, as someone that was a 17-year banker that when I've spoken in the community, I speak to this notion of, the kind of purpose of partnership, right? That whether it's banking or kind of this understanding of how you manage things within your own household, that you have to work to then become partners and not just a consumer. Right. And so for many people, we're never really at an equity partner stage. We're always at the consumer. We're always at the idea stage because that's the easiest stage to be in. Right. And that's a stage that from a mass standpoint, most people are okay being, because there's not as much accountability holistically when you're at the consumer idea level. So most of us are, we like to be at the level that culture is extracted from us and then sold back. And you see this, even in our Black community, for us, where corporations extract culture, or they even create the systems in place that create the culture that then is extracted and then sold back. Right.
Wow.
And you're in Chicago, right? So you're experiencing there another pandemic, which is, the murder rate and things like that, killings. And that, it's not unique to Chicago. We've got that across, our country. And so that the purpose of partnership is something that I share when I'm sharing real estate, where I'm talking to community banks about investing in low to moderate income communities, or even doing this podcast. It all centers around that purpose of partnership, that you can partner with companies. You don't just have to be their consumer or where they or their focus group, right? And so that's what's happening today is, these companies that are really cash rich because they don't own a ton of infrastructure, right? You got, the social media companies that become giants, some of the large, kind of DSPs with Spotify and that sort of thing. They can just, extract the culture and then give the community back pennies on it, whether it's the artist or the creator or whoever it is, and then kind of move forward from there. So no, it's a tremendous thought that you share, and I hope, MYB, that you're kind of really listening to this, because it's the purpose of partnership, and that's going forward is, even if you're working at your company right now, work towards becoming a partner. And so how do you do that, Mark? The way, and I'd love for you to chime in and kind of share on that, but one way to help do that is, if you're working right now today, you've got 401k, you're at your company, whatnot, you've got to engage in the training and development, because that's where you're going to learn about not just how the company works and whatnot, but you're going to learn about the company's gaps, right? Because every company is just like in sports. We were talking about it, whether it's on a football field, a basketball court, no defense can cover everything. The defense is always going to be somewhat at the mercy, Mark, of the offense, right? Because the offense knows where it's going. It's looking at its goal, and the defense typically has his or her back to the goal, right? So you're always somewhat at a disadvantage. And so if you can level that playing field by understanding what they're leaving open on the field, that can create opportunity. Not just that you have to leave the company and create a company, to fill that. You can do that right there, as you work for the company. Many companies, I think, are more flexible and adaptable now, Mark, that they're open to, if you come with a group and you've got it vetted out and you say, hey, here's where our defense is open, right? And this is where, any quarterback can swing the ball to the other side of the field, and score on us. Now, that company may not have the vision. They may say, there's no way they can do that, Ron. There's just no way. There's no, if they do that, we'll just lose, right?
Yeah.
If they're good enough to do that, they just beat us. And then it happens, right?
Yeah, whether you believe you're wrong or right, whether you believe you can or you can't, you're right. Either way. Right?
Exactly. And so, I think many people miss out opportunities, like you say, to partner. Right. It doesn't have to be, so you don't have to feel this pressure of, I want to be an entrepreneur or business owner, Mark. So I have to make this complete 180 shift and leave my income and leave that, because that's difficult for a lot of people. Right. Particularly as you get older and you get family, you get different responsibilities. Right. So I think there's so many people that could benefit from, thinking of things and how do you partner? Right. So,
yeah.
what are your thoughts?
Well, you got to have a third category. There's employee, there's entrepreneur, but you're talking about intrapreneur.
Yes.
Maybe there's a better word for it than that, but somebody who is taking their job seriously enough to influence the culture at your job.
Sure.
And you're right. I think, it's possible, and you're in a healthy work environment when you can take control or build something that influences your company for good. You don't have to go leave your business to go do something worthwhile with your life. No, not at all. You can do it right there where you are. For sure.
Yeah, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. So, as we progress through, Mark, and none of us have the crystal ball, and we see, as it relates to the pandemic, cases rising, that sort of thing. What do you envision as we go into 2021? I mean, the election, I guess, is somewhat behind us. We have to wait and see how the current president conducts things here over the next, say, month and a half. This could be very eye-opening and telling. But assuming that we do move on and we have a new, president, a new vice president, some of the Senate, maybe Congress, flip-flops, maybe turns over, whatever that is, irregardless of all of that. What do you envision as we go into 2021, just in the financial sector, and people managing their finances? What are the things you think we could see?
It's easy to plan for the future when you have a long enough history. So I'm going to give you the 90 seconds of the last 40 years and then the next 20 years of the market. I don't know what next year is going to bring. I can't predict that. Nobody can. But I can say from 1980 to 2000, we'll call that the booming 20. In fact, I'll say the booming 20 because that's when the boomers were becoming of age. And if you think about it, that's also when the 401k was coming of age.
Yeah.
And if you get an entire nation to dump a bunch of money into the stock market via 401k, what's going to happen to the stock market?
It inflates. Right.
Going up. Yeah. And you get the largest generational gap called the boomers pumping money into the stock market. It's going to fly high. And it did. From 1980 to 2000, we had the largest rate of return in the nation's history. Average rate of return of the market before 1980, 4% a year. During 1980 to 2000, it was 17% a year.
Right.
That says a lot. So that was 1980 to 2000. From 2000 to 2020, I'm going to call that the boring 20. Okay. So from booming to boring. Okay. Why boring? Well, we had some pretty not boring stuff in those years. We had the market crash of 2001. We had the market crash of 2008 and real estate crash of 2008. But if you look from 2000 to 2013, the price of the S&P was exactly even.
Yeah.
You made no money for 13 years. And that could be repeated a few other time points along that way. We had the lowest returns that I've ever seen in the stock market history. Dalbar, the third-party research firm Dalbar, says real investors over the last 20 to 30 years was in the ballpark real returns of about 3.5%. That's a boring 20 years, in my opinion. So what's the next 20 years? Back to your question, what's the future hold? Can't predict what's going to happen to Trump or the next president. I'm thinking, again, you got to think 20 years out. If I'm thinking about the next 20 years, let's call it the pouring 20, POORING, because that's when the boomers are going to be sucking money out of the stock market to spend at the grocery store. And all that money they pumped into their 401ks is going to be coming back to their pockets to spend to cover their shortfall from Social Security and more. So what happens to the stock market when 10,000 baby boomers retire every single day for the next 20 years?
Yeah. It bottoms out.
It's going to drop. Yeah. So
now,
whatever happens.
Let me say this though, Mark. Does it bottom out, or does the wealth just transfer to the next generation? So do Gen X and millennials just kind of pick up the slack, and maybe it gets redistributed, out of the stock market into either other vehicles, or what could be very likely, because the generations that came after baby boomers didn't have the opportunity to benefit from, for lack of a better term, they didn't benefit from war that was long standing, that created wealth in this wars. What kind of wars after Vietnam have been managed a certain way, and that hasn't cascaded down to the people the way World War II did. Right. So, those next generations didn't benefit from those events, right? So I imagine those next generations that would take over some of the asset as baby boomers transition life, they're going to extract that from the stock market and either put it into more righteous causes themselves, keep it more as cash flow for themselves, or maybe do other things. Do you think? I
certainly hope so. Yeah. Well, the average 401k balance for 55 to 63-year-old is $120,000.
Sure.
So that's not going to be. There's going to be a massive wealth transfer. You're right. But I'd say a lot of it's going to go to grocery stores and covering the bills.
Yes. Exactly.
Which some of that might go back into the market. I mean, that doesn't just disappear, but I'd say, we really have to ask ourselves, there's going to be a select group of millennials, Gen Xers, Gen Zers that are going to inherit massive amounts of wealth. But then there's going to be the vast majority of Americans that are going to be wondering what happened to their inheritance, unfortunately. And, we have to ask ourselves, what can we do in the face of these times to not just survive, but to become better off as a result? Again, antifragile your money. If you throw your rock, if you have a rock and you throw it at a window, it's going to shatter.
Sure.
What could you do to where you're not just that glass window waiting to be broken? What could you do to where you actually, like a ripple in a pond, you throw a rock into a pond and it becomes stronger as a result? It knows how to absorb that shock and actually return to state of calm and sanity. If your money is like that pond where it can absorb a shock and then return to sanity, you can make it. You can survive any crash, market crash or otherwise. And I hope for the very best of America. I think it's possible to see the brightest days ahead, but we have to think different about our money, economy, our future, because what we've done the last 20, 40 years has been a big, great experiment, and we're starting to see the results now as boomers retire without a bunch of money on hand.
Yep, exactly. No doubt about it. What are, as we kind of wrap up here, this has been a tremendous dialogue, Mark. What are just some best overall practice? You've given a great, number of nuggets already just in, through our dialogue, but what are just one or two things that have worked really well for you that you think will work for someone? Again, when they get done listening to this podcast, what do they take with them? That can help them be just a little bit better. So, what are one or two things that have worked well for you and your family that you think will work well for others listening?
This little thought experiment, try it out. And for me, I have habits. Usually I'll have a snack or something once a day. I'll have a coffee in the morning.
Yeah.
Set yourself a commitment to set a timer on your phone. Because if you're like most of us, we're all driving, we're all heading, we're doing our dishes, we're walking the dog. Just set a little reminder for yourself whenever you typically have that cup of coffee or that snack to spend 5 minutes and ask yourself this one question. What do I want my money to do for me?
Yes.
And ask yourself that question with the intention of getting an answer. Do I want my money tax deferred or tax free? Do I want guarantees? Do I want it to be trapped or do I want it to be accessible to me? Do I want it private or do I want it open to the government sponsorship? These are questions that I don't have an answer for each person listening, but you guys, each of you can listen and ask yourself those questions. What do I want? What characteristics do I want my money to have? And what do I want my money to do for me? Because where you put your money makes it act different.
Yeah, it does.
Put it in the right environment. That's all. That's the one thing I'd say for folks to do.
Yep, absolutely. Mark, tell us about the podcast before we get out of here. What can we expect? Tell us a little bit of the history about how it came about. And again, what can all of us expect as we go to check out episodes?
Well, Ron, you and I started our podcast around the same time. And so I'm just trying to keep up with you. We're not at 200 episodes yet, but we're getting close. Yeah. And we've had a lot of fun. It's just helping folks think counterintuitively and try to think with new eyes and new minds for what do we want our money doing for us. And we've got real estate, we've got income stream options, we've got fairly sophisticated but also balanced and old-fashioned ways of putting away for the future and also saving for things we need today too, right now.
Sure.
Business solutions, college solutions. The show is called Not Your Average Financial Podcast.
Yes.
And so we'll just, I guess you can find us anywhere you are listening to this show too.
Yep, absolutely. And so, as I said early on, to Mark's point, definitely go in and subscribe to the podcast, leave a 5-star positive written comment. Yes, you have to type. Yep. Type the comment out. Don't just hit 5 stars and walk away. Take it just a quick 30 seconds and type out a positive message and add Mark's show definitely to your repertoire. Not Your Average Financial Podcast. Make sure that you do that today, MYB. And I'm sure Mark and his team will definitely appreciate that. Mark, for those that are interested, whether they're in kind of your area or not, maybe they have additional questions or would love to connect with you. Maybe they're like your customer that you were talking to. Maybe they've got $500,000 sitting around and they just, they need someone to help them through that problem they have. You can call me and then call Mark.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Or just take a few zeros off, or add a few zeros. Again, you don't have to be that guy, but if you're trying to figure out how to think through the answer to that question I just posed to everybody, give me a call. I'd be happy to chat. We have a calendar online. If you go to notyouraverageFinancialPodcast.com and click on request a meeting, we can do a 15-minute phone call just to say hello and maybe clarify any questions, ideas, thoughts you had from today's episode. That's notyouraverageFinancialPodcast.com and click on the request a meeting button.
Yep, absolutely. And that's in the show notes for you as well, MYB community. So very simple. Just click on the link for the show that Mark just laid out, notyouraverageFinancialPodcast.com. Do that. I expect as many of you as possible to add yourselves to Mark's calendar over time, over the next many weeks and months, and have a brief conversation with him and let him know that you heard him right here on the Minding Your Business podcast. Mark, listen, this has been tremendous, man. I really appreciate your transparency, your candor, and your strength, and sharing this information with our audience. Again, I think it helps us all challenge our personal critical thinking around that question that you posed to us, which is, what do we want our money to do for us? And as we think about our money as our own employee, right, or employees, right? And so if an employee, you wouldn't have an employee just go to the bank and just sit in the lobby, right? And that's all they did all day.
Mm-hmm.
And where are all my employees? Oh, they're all
That's
sitting
great.
at the bank, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they're doing. They're just sitting there in the lobby eating lollipops and
That's
watching the
great.
television,
Yeah,
right? You
that's
want
great.
them doing something, right?
Mm-hmm.
So just
Mm-hmm.
like any employee that you hire, you want them doing something. So when you think
Yeah.
of that question that Mark posed, think about it from that perspective. You've hired every dollar that's in your checking account. You've hired them. Okay. So if even if your checking account's got $600 right now and it's after payday, okay. Those are 600 people that work for you. What do you want them doing? Would you hire 600 people to go sit and do nothing?
Mm.
So I'll leave that question for you.
That's great, Ron. Love it. Love it. Yeah. If you leave your job, if you leave your money unemployed, they'll go work for somebody else.
Yes. There you go. Yep. Exactly. So think about those questions, MYB. And, I just thank you, Mark, so much for your time on this podcast and really delivering some, tremendous jewels for us, man. Thank you.
My pleasure. Keep up the good work.
Yep, absolutely. So our guest today, Mark Willis, CFP, there in the Chicago, Illinois area. Make sure that you check him out online, and check out his podcast, Not Your Average Financial Podcast. I imagine, and I'm going to do the same, but I imagine if you thought you got some jewels today, I imagine you'll definitely get them on the podcast. So very thanks to Mark for joining us today. Make sure you go again to champronbrooks.com. Check me out there. I'd love to hear from you, and you can fill out a contact form. I'd love to hear from you. Love to hear the good, bad, and ugly, things that I can work on the show, things that you love, guest recommendations, anything of that nature. MYB community, definitely hit me up and do that. Listen, enjoy the holiday next week if it's one that you celebrate. If not, just enjoy the time as always. And remember, there's 3 things that unite us together. No matter how you look in the mirror, no matter what side of the tracks you're from, no matter what your political ideology is or any of that, even irregardless of the pandemic and that sort of thing. 3 things unite us. We all want to be a little better for ourselves, a little better for our families, and a little better for our communities. And if we keep that in mind with everybody that we interact with, that we all have that united front desire, we can make this place just a little bit better for us all. Okay? Go be great. Champ on the Minding Your Business podcast.